you've had critics. I mean,
Sure.
everybody who stands out and is making an impact, there's people who don't, they are jealous or whatever. So there's been critics of
Sure.
Andrew Huberman.
Yeah, including some very well-respected scientists.
And is it because your sense of purpose and this message that you're feeling that you're able to ignore that?
Well,
or do you ignore it?
Yeah, at first it was hard to ignore. Sort of like, hey, like I was one, and I still consider myself one of the neuroscience community. I earned my stripes, right? Those papers didn't publish themselves.
You went to school for 50 fucking years.
Yeah, and I reviewed those people's papers, and I know about them, and I know they're not perfect. But anytime you're getting defensive, and someone's pointing their finger at you, and you're pointing back like you're, and it's listen, we all have that impulse, including me.
Yeah.
I would say about a third of scientists were very supportive and said, hey, go for it. This is great. People are learning. I clearly understand why you're doing this. And actually, I'm benefiting from some of the information. A lot of scientists are really unhealthy. A lot of physicians are really unhealthy. Look at them.
Right.
Okay. It's not just weight. Sometimes it's weight. It's also just look at them. They're clearly not well. Okay. So, and many of them are, but fewer are than aren't actually. Okay. About a third, I would say, just I haven't heard from. Maybe they're, and then there are
no comment.
Yeah. And then a third, I think, have been critical in part that we run sponsors and things like that. And I always say, look, the podcast to me is a perfect ecosystem. The information is available free, free, completely free. And you don't have to watch it. You can slide past the ad reads if you don't want. But a lot of people want to know where they can obtain things that could be useful to them.
Helpful.
And they obviously some choose to do that. And that helps subsidize it for the kid that can't afford it, right? That can't afford the podcast. They get it free. Everyone gets it free. And then, of course, the sponsors are happy. So the funny thing is, and this was pointed out by a colleague of mine, usually the people that are criticizing that, that you're doing this podcast thing and there's advertisements, they're usually at universities where, guess what? Getting the education is behind a paywall. So the alternative is to put it behind a paywall, which we don't do. So it's not that I'm completely oblivious to it or that I ignore it, but what's kind of interesting, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, when you hear something the first time or 10 times, it hurts a little bit. You're like, hey, being misunderstood hurts. You want to say,
when you're passionate about something,
right?
When it's something you've been doing since you're 6 years old because you love it and you're still doing it, and now all of a sudden because you're successful, you're criticized for it,
right?
Because maybe these people haven't had the success. They see you, they're jealous, and so they want to try to tear it down. Or you're in shape, they're not in shape, and they do the same thing, and you're like, well, he's getting attention because he's jacked.
Well, I think
there's all sorts of ways to
I
minimize
think
it.
Critique always reveals people's insecurities too. I mean, a lot of them will say things and you realize, wow, they really think that I'm saying that people have to do all this stuff. I'm just giving you options. I'm not telling anyone what to do. I'm just giving you options.
I heard you say that last night. You were talking about underage drinking, and you said, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you, here's what happens.
Right.
Yeah.
So do as you will, but know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the critique, I also think part of it is because I don't just talk about my own work or cover subjects that I've worked on. I also go and research subjects that are in other people's domain. And I've always invited people to give me critique. In fact, we now have a formal portal on hubermanlab.com website where we invite, if you have a critique, put what the critique is, put what the basis of your critique is, right? Not, I don't like it, but are there data that are conflicting? We'll see what comes in. But to this day, I've gotten critique, especially on Twitter /X.
Yeah.
But no one's actually said, this is the problem I have. So that they just seem unhappy with it. But I will say, it's also been wonderful to hear the people that have benefited from morning sunlight, improved sleep, improved focus, and a number of other topics that we've covered. So when you get those critiques early on, it stings a bit. But it's sort of like publishing papers. When you get reviews back, anonymous reviews, the first ones, you're like, ouch, oof. But by the time you're publishing your 50th or 60th paper, it bounces off you like cap gun fire.
Yeah.
And in the same way on social media, if I make a mistake, I hope it's pointed out. But if people attack, I've gotten so much of it since I started that now I'm like, nah. And I don't mind it. It also really helps to have an amazing team and people around you. And that another thing I love about podcasting is that it's not competitive between podcasters. We have the same guests on, we run different content. So it's nice to have a community of people like you and Joe and Lex and et cetera, you can refer to if you're feeling kind of like, hey, how seriously should I take this critique? But having my podcast team, which is, many people, but it was started as kind of four people, Rob, Mike, Ian, and me. I run things by them. Hey, like, do you think this is valid, or should I think yes or no? And sometimes it's like, hey, yeah, we should talk about something that we could have done better. I am far from perfect. I mean, I have many, many, many flaws, but I do strive to get things right. I'll put anywhere from dozens to hundreds of hours into prep.
I would think that so the people that say that you shouldn't be sponsored, it's like, well, you're working your ass off. I mean, preparing for these teachings you're doing basically online in your podcast, it's like, why wouldn't you be compensated? And for the people that saying you shouldn't be, but are behind a paywall at the college, it's almost, I don't know. I mean, you're offering education to people who maybe never went to college, couldn't afford to go to college, but have learned so much from you for free. Yeah. I mean, how could that be criticized?
Well, I think one issue with academia that I absolutely have is that so much of its power is derived from this in-group, out-group thing. Like if people really understood how science was done.
Have and have-nots.
Yeah, if people really understood how science was done and that the people doing it are just like everybody else, but they picked that, they lose a little bit of their cachet. I believe everyone should at least have the information to give them access to mental health, physical health, and up-leveling their performance. So I make it zero cost. And I think that, when I say everyone, I mean everyone. And this is one of the great things about those early challenges I had. Had I just gone to school and had the perfect home and then gone off to college and then got a job and maybe I would have been a scientist, I don't think I would have the kind of understanding of what it's like to, like I had a friend those high school years and he had 14 brothers and sisters and his mother was a crack addict. And he fortunately made something of himself. But like, I truly don't distinguish between the janitor, the Nobel Prize winning scientist, the homeless person on the street. I do believe in personal accountability, but you don't know that person's story. I don't know that person's story. Everyone deserves the opportunity and no one gets away without hard work. So there's that. But I do believe that giving information out for free in the form of clear to them format is really key. A lot of academics use language that, people go, wow, like they're really smart.
Yeah.
But that's talking over people, right? So people say dumbing down is bad. Talking over is bad. So
that's my favorite thing about you. You can talk about shit. I would have no idea how to understand it, but in a way I can understand it. You know what I mean?
Well, it's like today I was asking a lot of questions about bow hunting, and thank you for that. Yeah, one of my goals, like one of the big challenges for me, is how to take complex information that's like embedded in nomenclature and make it accessible. Yeah. I mean, you challenged me on that earlier tonight. You said, wait, what were you doing in graduate school? And I'm like, okay. And it made me think about how what we call them in my field is axon guidance molecules, chemorepellents and stuff. I'm saying, you build a nervous system by saying, don't go here, go here, go here. And that's one of the things I really enjoy is trying to take complex themes and break them down into still accurate and actionable language so that the everyday person can say, hey, yeah, I understand why I need morning sunlight. Circadian rhythm. I've never heard of circadian, but like that makes sense. I understand why elevating your heart rate and your blood pressure with exercise would cause lower heart rate and blood pressure later because like it adapts, it changes. There's so many people in the world that don't have, and frankly, there's no need for them to get a formal education or certainly advanced education. So, but I believe they need the information too.
Well, it can better their life.
Right. And position them to do more in whatever endeavor they're in and position relationships in better places. So again, I'm at the point now where if someone sends me a valid criticism, meaning like I made an error, then certainly I'll correct that error. But otherwise, I talk to my team, and if it still bothers me, we're back to this again, but it's true. I close my eyes and I ask for guidance. What do I do with this? And then I listen, and I take that whatever information I hear seriously.